The chill of midnight hung heavy in the air, a silent accomplice to the clandestine dance unfolding in the Kanchari region. 3 days ago, a quiet sector near Burkina Faso's border with Togo, usually lulled by the gentle hum of the night, was jolted awake. A shadow, long and menacing, stretched across the landscape, a convoy, an endless line of trucks snaking through the darkness. Border guards, vigilant even in the deepest hours, felt a shiver of unease. This wasn't right. The ice sheer scale, the furtive movement under a blanket of stars, screamed of something far more sinister than ordinary nocturnal transit. Captain Traoré, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, wasted no time. Every instinct screamed danger, and he immediately relayed the ominous details to the higher-ups. Intelligence reports, whispered like secrets through the digital. Veins of the network claimed the convoy was merely carrying humanitarian aid, but a discordant note struck President Ibrahim Traoré's ear. Humanitarian aid? At midnight? Along deserted back roads, shunning the familiar, well-worn paths? His gut tightened. This wasn't a simple case of aid delivery. This was a prelude to something far more sinister. He felt it deep in his bones, a tremor of foreboding that ran through him like a jolt of electricity. His voice, though calm, held an edge of steel as he reached for the phone, his fingers already dialing the number for General Ibrahim Zerbo, the Special Forces commander. "General," he commanded, his words slicing through the silence. "Stop the convoy, but be careful. This might not be simple smuggling." The Special Forces moved like ghosts, their movements fluid and silent under the cloak of night. An ambush was meticulously set on the lonely road, a deadly trap waiting to snap shut. Above, the rhythmic thrum of helicopter blades sliced through. The air, while silent drones, eyes in the sky, painted a clear picture of the unsuspecting convoy's slow, inexorable advance. 47 trucks, a behemoth of unseen cargo, lumbered forward, oblivious to the net tightening around them. At 4 in the morning, as the first hint of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, the operation exploded into life. Roads were blocked, headlights piercing the darkness like a predatory gaze. Panic rippled through the convoy. Drivers, caught in the sudden glare, scrambled, desperate to flee, but the circle was ironclad. After a short, sharp chase, all were captured, their faces etched with terror. Then came the moment that ripped the breath from everyone's lungs. The first truck, its cargo doors wrenched open, revealed a sight that turned stomachs and chilled hearts. Bags, innocently marked humanitarian aid, spilled forth not grains or medicine, but a horrifying torrent of modern automatic weapons. AK-47s, M16s, glinting hand grenades, and the ominous tubes of rocket launchers. Each truck was a mobile arsenal, a harbinger of chaos. Captain Kabori, his voice trembling with a mixture of shock and urgency, immediately called President Traoré. "Mr. President," he stammered, "you won't believe it, but there are enough weapons here to equip an entire army. This isn't normal smuggling. Someone is preparing to start a war in Burkina Faso." Traoré's voice, though still calm, resonated with a chilling determination. "Collect everything," he ordered, his words a steel thread weaving through the crackling line. "Not a single bullet should be lost, and make the drivers talk. We need to find out who is behind this, who dares to threaten our peace." The first to break was Jean-Baptiste Compère, one of the captured drivers. His voice, a thin, reedy whisper, trembled with fear. "They told us these were agricultural machinery parts," he confessed, his eyes wide with a desperate plea for understanding. "We were supposed to take them to a warehouse in Togo. From there they'd be loaded onto a ship." But as the interrogations deepened, the horrifying scale of the plot began to unfurl. Most drivers truly had no idea of their deadly cargo, but the orchestrators of this dark symphony were chillingly professional. Each truck had followed a different, winding route, departing at staggered times, only to converge at the border, forming this monstrous convoy. On the second day, the detailed search yielded even more unsettling discoveries. Serial numbers on the weapons, painstakingly etched to obscure their origin, were painstakingly revealed by Burkina Faso's intelligence with modern techniques. The origins of these weapons painted a grim picture of global conflict. Some had seen the brutal light of day in Libya's civil war. Others bore the scars of Yemen's endless strife, while a terrifying number were brand new, gleaming and unused. The total value of this deadly cargo soared past a staggering $100 million. Who had paid such a price for destruction? Traoré, his face a mask of grim resolve, immediately convened the National Security Council. The inventory of seized weapons was laid bare, a chilling testament to the scale of the threat. 15,000 AK-47 rifles, 5,000 M16s, 3 million bullets, 50,000 hand grenades, 1,500 rocket launchers, 200 anti-aircraft missiles, 20 tons of explosives. Defense Minister General Sadou Traoré was visibly shaken. "You could invade a small country with these weapons," he murmured, his voice laced with disbelief. "These were definitely prepared for a coup or a civil war. Who needs this many weapons?" Interior Minister Ousmane Karé's concern was palpable. "Mr. President, if these weapons had been distributed, our country would have turned into a bloodbath. Terror groups could have fought for years with these, or opposition groups could have staged a coup." Traoré rose, his presence filling the room with an almost palpable intensity. "Friends," he declared, his voice resonating with conviction, "this is not a coincidence. Someone wants to destabilize our country, just like in Libya, Syria, Yemen. But we are awake. We have disrupted their game." Intelligence Chief Commandant Oumar Drago took the floor, his eyes fixed on Traoré. "Mr. President, one of the captured drivers has started talking. The final destination of the weapons was secret warehouses in Ouagadougou. They would be distributed there." Upon receiving this chilling revelation, Traoré made a tough decision, his jaw set in a line of unwavering resolve. "Immediately," he commanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "Start a large-scale operation in Ouagadougou. Search all suspicious warehouses, find out who is waiting for these weapons, and most importantly, find the financiers." The next day, as dawn broke over the capital, Ouagadougou awoke to the roar of a massive operation. Simultaneous raids were conducted on 23 different addresses. 17 warehouses yielded more weapons, their sheer volume mind-boggling. Among those arrested were names that sent shockwaves through the country: former ministers, retired generals, wealthy businessmen, and even a few foreign diplomats. Their common thread? Their fierce opposition to the Traoré administration. On the fourth day of the operation, the biggest shock reverberated through the nation. One of the arrested businessmen, François Bonkungu, became an informant. His statement dropped like a bomb, sending tremors through the very foundations of the conspiracy. Bonkungu, trembling, his voice a broken whisper, began to confess. "This plan was made months ago. Foreign powers promised us support. We would overthrow Traoré. A pro-Western government would be established in its place. The weapons were brought for this." Traoré, his eyes narrowed, pressed him further. "Which foreign powers?" Bonkungu hesitated, fear warring with a desperate need to cleanse his soul. Finally he spoke. "Meetings were held in Accra. There were participants. From Abidjan too. Instructions came from Paris. Approval was obtained from Washington." The room fell into a stunned silence. Everyone was in shock, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. Traoré, his voice barely a whisper, urged him. "Continue." Bonkungu continued his chilling narrative. "The plan was like this. First, terrorist attacks would be organized, the people would panic, then the opposition would rise up. Collaborators within the army would stage a coup. Even more terrible details emerged. The codename for this insidious plot was Operation Restore Democracy. The budget, a staggering $200 million. The weapons were just the first, deadly part of this elaborate scheme. Among the names Bonkungu provided were shocking ones. Some Western embassy officials, representatives of multinational companies, even some international organization workers were implicated. In light of this explosive information, Traoré made a momentous decision. He would hold a historic press conference. The world had to know about this conspiracy. The world had to see how Africa was being destabilized, how its very sovereignty was being eroded by unseen hands. The press conference was broadcast live on national television, reaching every corner of Burkina Faso, every eager ear tuned to the unfolding drama. Behind Traoré, some of the seized weapons were displayed, a stark, terrifying tableau. The sheer piles of them, gleaming under the bright lights, sent a shiver of fear through the hearts of those watching. Traoré began his speech, his voice clear and resonant, filling the air with a quiet authority. "Dear Burkinabe brothers and world public," he began, his gaze sweeping across the assembled journalists and the cameras beaming his image across the globe. 3 days ago, we prevented the biggest arms smuggling in our history. But this was not just arms smuggling. This was part of a conspiracy planned against our country. He held up documents, their pages filled with damning evidence. "Here is the evidence: 47 trucks of weapons, total value $100 million. The target is to destabilize Burkina Faso, to turn our people against each other, and to establish a puppet government." Traoré continued, his voice hardening, each word a hammer blow of defiance. "Where did these weapons come from? I cannot yet disclose all the details, but I can say this. Imperialist powers still want to control Africa, but they will not succeed, because we are awake." Journalists in the hall, their pens poised, began to fire questions excitedly. A CNN correspondent, her voice sharp with anticipation, asked, "Which countries are behind these weapons?" Traoré's answer was firm. "The investigation continues, but some of the weapons were manufactured in NATO countries." A BBC correspondent, her brow furrowed with concern, inquired, "So, who are the leaders of this conspiracy?" Traoré responded, 17 people have been arrested. Among them are former ministers and generals. Informants are talking. Soon, all the truth will come out." An Al Jazeera correspondent, her voice reflecting the global interest, asked, "How? Will this event affect regional security?" Traoré answered decisively, "This is an attack not only on Burkina Faso, but on all of Africa. Similar conspiracies are being carried out in Mali, Niger, Guinea. We must now act together." A journalist from the Russian press, his voice carrying a subtle hint of solidarity, asked, "Will you increase your security measures?" Traoré's response was unequivocal. "Definitely. Our army is on alert. Our borders are under tight control. And most importantly, our people are with us." The most striking moment of the press conference came with the broadcast of one of the detainees' statements. François Bonkungu, his face haggard and streaked with tears, appeared on the screen. His confessions horrified everyone. "They deceived us," Bonkungu sobbed, his voice choked with regret. "They said, 'You will bring democracy.' Actually, we would have divided our country. Traoré is right. We became traitors. I apologize to my people." When the video ended, the hall was plunged into a stunned silence. Traoré, his voice filled with a quiet power, continued, "Here is their real face. These people were selling their country for money, but they failed, and they will fail." As the press conference continued, a tide of humanity had begun to gather outside. Thousands of people, their faces etched with a mixture of anger and fierce loyalty, had taken to the streets to support Traoré. "Long live Traoré! Down with imperialism!" were chanted, their voices a powerful roar against the conspirators. Traoré, his heart swelling with pride, addressed the sea of faces. "Dear people, thanks to your support, we prevented this conspiracy. Thanks to your vigilance, our country is safe. As long as we are together, no one can defeat us." Young people held a support demonstration, their torches blazing against the fading light, symbolizing their unwavering resolve. Women sang the national anthem, their voices soaring with patriotic fervor. The elderly prayed, "God protect Traoré. Protect our country," their words a quiet, fervent plea. Meanwhile, a wave of support messages began to pour in from across Africa. Mali's leader, Assimi Goïta, declared, "Brother Traoré is the owner of Africa. We are also tightly controlling our borders." Niger's leader, Abdourahmane Chiani, echoed the sentiment. "This conspiracy is against all of us. We must now share intelligence. Africa must ensure its own security." Guinea's leader, Mamadi Doumbouya, spoke with conviction. "There is no place for arms barons in Africa. Traoré's courage should be an example to all of us." Senegal's leader, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, sent a message that resonated with regional unity. "As the African Union, we must tighten the arms embargo. Our continent is not a weapons depot. Even Chad's leader, Mohamed Deby, offered support. "We must act together in the fight against terrorism. These weapons could have fallen into the hands of terrorists." From Uganda, Yoweri Museveni praised the young leader. "My young brother Traoré did a great job. Africa can now ensure its own security." And from South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa stated, "This event should be a lesson for all of Africa. Arms smugglers and their supporters must be punished." On the 5th day of the operation, new developments sent further shockwaves. Documents seized from computers revealed the true, terrifying extent of the conspiracy. Not only Burkina Faso, but the entire Sahel region was targeted. The documents contained striking details, a separate, meticulously crafted plan for each country. In Burkina Faso, Traoré; in Mali, Goita; in Niger, Chiani, all were slated for overthrow. Pro-Western leaders would replace them, turning the region into a puppet show. The financial dimension of the plan also emerged, a colossal budget of $1 billion. The investigation into the source of this vast sum led to unsettling trails, some stretching to Gulf countries, others to Europe. Traoré held a second press conference, his voice now imbued with an unyielding anger. "Now the masks have fallen," he declared, his gaze unwavering. "Those who want to recolonize Africa should know, we are the grandchildren of Thomas Sankara. We will not kneel." The new documents he displayed were even more shocking. The list of the government to be established after the coup had already been prepared. Ministers determined, task distributions made, even the first actions meticulously planned. Traoré, his voice laced with fury, exclaimed, "Look how brazen they are. They have already shared the ministries before overthrowing us. But they forgot one thing. The people of Burkina Faso are the owners of these lands." Among the newly arrested were also foreign nationals. 3 French, 2 British, 1 American, and interestingly 2 Israelis. All possessed diplomatic passports, but they were no diplomats. The interrogation of these individuals immediately triggered an international crisis. The relevant countries demanded the release of their citizens, but Traoré stood firm, his resolve unyielding. "Having a diplomatic passport does not give freedom to commit crimes," he stated, his voice resonating with conviction. On the 6th day, the court process began, the air thick with anticipation and the raw emotion of a nation demanding justice. The detainees appeared before the judge, their faces etched with despair. The charges were damning: attempting to overthrow the state, establishing a terrorist organization, arms smuggling, and even treason. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, every eye fixed on the proceedings. The people craved justice, a swift and uncompromising retribution for those who had dared to threaten their peace. The defendants, looking miserable, some crying, some expressing regret, found themselves facing an undeniable mountain of evidence. The prosecutor, his voice booming with righteous indignation, read his indictment. Audio recordings, video footage, bank receipts, and damning confessions filled the file. Defense lawyers, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of evidence, struggled to mount a credible defense. Meanwhile, international pressure mounted, a suffocating blanket of threats. Some Western countries, their voices laced with thinly veiled menace, threatened Burkina Faso with economic sanctions. But Traoré, a bulwark of defiance, refused to back down. "History will judge those who threaten us," he declared, his gaze unwavering. Russia and China, seizing the opportunity, offered their unequivocal support to Burkina Faso. Putin's spokesman stated, "Every country has the right to ensure its security. Traoré is fighting a rightful struggle." China went even further, announcing, "We will donate security equipment to Burkina Faso. We stand with them in the fight against terrorism." Turkey also extended its support, its message resonating with solidarity. "Africa's security is our security too. Arms smuggling is a crime against humanity." Iran, its voice strong and resolute, declared, "Imperialist powers should leave Africa alone. Democracy cannot be brought with weapons." Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro, his voice ringing with revolutionary fervor, hailed Traoré. "Brother Traoré is the new Bolívar, the hero, leader of anti-imperialists." On the 7th day, Traoré appeared before his people. A sea of thousands gathered. their anticipation a tangible force in the air. His speech, delivered with passionate conviction, was historic, a moment etched into the very soul of the nation. "Dear people," he began, his voice ringing out, "a week ago we prevented a major conspiracy against our country. We seized 47 trucks of weapons, but more importantly, we disrupted the game. We caught those who wanted to turn us against each other." The people, their hearts swelling with pride, applauded enthusiastically, their cheers a roaring testament to their unwavering support. Traoré continued, his voice gaining momentum. "This victory is not only ours but all of Africa's victory. Now no one can play games with weapons in Africa. Now no one can try to make us puppets." Young people kept tempo, chanting, "Traoré, Traoré," their voices a rhythmic beat of adoration. Women shouted cries of victory, their voices a joyous chorus. The elderly shed tears, their faces etched with a profound sense of relief and gratitude. Traoré concluded his speech with a visionary declaration. "We will melt these weapons and build schools, build hospitals. We will transform death tools into life tools. This is the real victory." When his speech ended, the square erupted in a roar of jubilation. Everyone was hugging, kissing, celebrating, a collective sigh of relief washing over the nation. Burkina Faso had been saved from a great disaster. On the 8th day of the operation, the fate of the seized weapons was sealed. As Traoré had promised, some would be melted down and sold as metal, their dark purpose transformed into a source of light. The income generated would be meticulously channeled into education, nurturing young minds instead of destroying lives. Some weapons would be given to the army, their purpose now to defend the nation, not to tear it apart. They would be used for the modernization of the Burkina Faso army, ensuring the country's security. The rest would be destroyed, eradicated, their very existence erased from the landscape. This event was not merely a weapons operation, it was a profound symbol of Africa's awakening, a declaration that the continent would now determine its own destiny. Traoré, with this audacious operation, not only seized weapons, but also salvaged Africa's honor. The young leader, once again, had bravely challenged imperialism and emerged victorious. As the echoes of this momentous event continued to reverberate, a new era was dawning in Africa. No longer would any power dare to threaten Africa with weapons, for Africa now possessed leaders like Traoré, leaders who walked hand in hand with their people, unwavering in their march against imperialism from darkness to the radiant light of freedom. On the 10th day of the operation, Traoré made another surprise move, a bold stroke of symbolism that captivated the nation. He organized a major event in Independence Square, a powerful exhibition designed to display some of the seized weapons. Tens of thousands of citizens flocked to witness the horrifying spectacle, their eyes widening at the sight of the towering piles of arms. People gasped, their faces etched with disbelief. "How could so many weapons have been smuggled into the country?" a woman whispered, her voice barely audible. An old man, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, murmured, "They were going to kill our grandchildren with these." A young woman, her voice filled with a fierce gratitude, shouted, "If it weren't for Traoré, civil war would have broken. Out by now." Traoré, his voice ringing with unwavering conviction, addressed the hushed crowd. "This is what I wanted to show you," he declared, his gaze sweeping across the faces in the square. "This was the future our enemies had prepared for us, but we were vigilant, we were united, and we won." He then made another important announcement, his words electrifying the crowd. "Dear people, with the money we will get from selling these weapons, we will build 100 schools. We will open 50 health centers. We will construct 1,000 kilometers of irrigation canals. Death tools will turn into life projects." The people erupted. In enthusiastic applause, their cheers a thunderous echo of support. At that moment, weapons began to be symbolically melted in a giant cauldron brought to the stage, a powerful visual representation of transformation. The mold made from the first melted weapon would be a school bell, its future ringing with the promise of education. "Every morning when our children hear this bell," Traoré said, his voice filled with emotion, "they will hear the voice of peace." International observers watched this scene with amazement, their expressions a mixture of wonder and respect. The United Nations representative, his voice filled with admiration, declared, "This is the first in African history. They are transforming weapons into peace symbols." The African Union Special Representative delivered an emotional speech, his voice thick with pride. Traoré didn't just seize weapons, he changed Africa's destiny. Now the entire continent will follow his example. Meanwhile, the court process continued, the defendant's confessions revealing more terrible details every day. It became clear that the conspiracy was not limited to Burkina Faso, but was a colossal plan covering all of West Africa. The route of the seized weapons was meticulously determined. They had originated in Eastern Europe, traversing the dangerous terrain of Libya to descend into the Sahel. Intermediaries, a shadowy network of collaborators, existed in every country. Bribes had been paid at every stage, a complete, intricately woven organized crime network. Traoré, his resolve unwavering, shared this vital information with Interpol. International arrest warrants were issued, assets of the arms barons frozen, and the entire criminal network systematically dismantled. The 15th day was declared a celebration day, a day of national awakening and victory to be commemorated. Every year, children in schools would learn about this momentous event, ensuring that future generations would remain vigilant, their understanding rooted in this hard-won triumph. Traoré, in his final speech, delivered with a powerful sense of conviction, reiterated the profound impact of their victory. "This victory showed that Africa can now stand on its own feet," he declared, his voice resonating with pride. "We can ensure our own security, we can determine our own destiny, and most importantly, when we are united, no one can defeat us. Neither with weapons, nor with money, nor with lies. Africa's time has come." And this time, he asserted, began with Traoré. Burkina Faso had become an inspiring example, a beacon of hope. Other African countries, emboldened by their success, were also awakening. Arms barons and their shadowy supporters could no longer seek refuge in Africa. As Traoré had said, Africa would no longer be a weapons depot, but a depot of hope. A depot of peace, freedom, and brotherhood. And this depot would be open to all humanity, not with weapons, but with love. Not with bombs, but with knowledge. Not with bullets, but with brotherhood. This was the miracle Traoré had created. Not seizing 47 trucks of weapons, but winning 47 million hearts. And those hearts were now beating for freedom, beating for independence, beating for Africa. If you found this story compelling and want to stay updated on critical events shaping our world, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more in-depth content like this.